Now, we'll be taking a look at that 21 African heads of state with international guests, including 3 vice presidents, 4 ministers, and 24 envoys who are all present in the country for President John Dramani Mahama's swearing-in ceremony, demonstrating a huge diplomatic applause for Ghana's democratic transition. But what does the visit of these African and international dignitaries mean for our foreign policy and security? And of course, John Dramani Mahama's potential role in the geopolitical space. Samuel Kojo Brace and I are here steering the conversations, but joining us in studio is Dr. Ishmael Ni Amano Dodu. He's former senior UN diplomat, Executive Office of UN Secretary General and UNDP Africa Bureau. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you on the AM show.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to see you as well. And Happy New Year to both of you.
Yeah, many happy returns.
Many happy returns, yes. But we'll start this conversation by bringing in Dr. Aning. He has also written on, especially the security bit of what happened on the inauguration day. He's not been too excited by how, you know, the security forces allowed the Burkinabe leader to go and greet the President John Dramani Mahama with his gun strapped to his waist. But aside that, he also has a lot of things about Ghana's role in the security of the sub-region and all of that. Let's start with him. Professor Aning is someone that has a lot to share when it comes to security. He's a security consultant, and we're glad to have him on the show this morning. Prof, good morning to you.
You have to unmute for us.
Unmute so we can hear you.
All these modern technologies and
right.
Good morning to you, and a very happy New Year to you and your listeners.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, we've been following an article you've written, and Suti is quite interested in that particular one, especially with regards to the leader of Burkinabe going to President Dramani Mahama with his gun to his waist.
Yeah. Prof, we just want to find out, first of all, what is the danger there? I mean, reactions are pouring in that it didn't matter because nothing really happened. But what is the danger there, and what security protocols did we breach?
Well, I mean, it's not so much an actual danger as protocols around visiting heads of states and those who protect them bearing arms. The normal routine is that, yes, the security detail of a president will travel with him, but they will leave the guns on the plane after having declared them to the receiving country's security. The security counts, the receiving country's security forces are duty bound to protect the visiting head of state.
Okay.
You know, so it is not so much as to whether it is part of his sartorial taste or that there were no bullets in it. No, there were almost about 15, 20 other heads of states present. And had they all come bearing guns, I mean, that would have changed the tenor of the ceremony. So I think we should be bold enough to admit in resetting the country when we make mistakes that, hang on, you know, this was an oversight. We ought to have insisted that it shouldn't come bearing a gun. Traore being in Accra was a great coup for Mahama and his team. So much as we are concerned about the gun issue, that should not deflect us from the importance of this man's presence after the disastrous attempt at selling him out in Washington by the former president.
Okay, and you also said that this should not happen again. I'm quoting you, and he said we have to consider the circumstances under which this happened. The argument that this was part of his uniform does not hold at all. I just, for the purposes of education, you mentioned that the guns were supposed to be checked on the plane and all that. Under the circumstances, what was the ideal situation? Should they have removed the guns from him before approaching the president? What's the ideal thing that we should have done?
Now, we know that Traore has a particular sartorial style, in which, for the purposes of the security situation in Burkina Faso, I think he has experienced about 4 or 5 assassination attempts in Burkina Faso. that there's a heightened sense around his personal security. So he's used to traveling with his gun. But let's not forget that probably this is just about the second or third country Traore has ever visited because of the international opprobrium around how he came to power. You know, that being the case, those who handled the protocol around these presidential visits for the inauguration ought to have laid down some clear red lines that this is how we do business in Ghana. You know, so all this pussyfooting, trying to find excuses, does not wash. Look, let's get things done properly on the basis of correct risk assessment and make the firm decisions in our interest as a sovereign country. Okay, let this be a lesson that those around the president who seem to project this new vision of a reset must do things properly.
Right. I know Kojo wants to come to you in terms of something that
No, even on this,
saying,
yes, because Colonel Festus Abuaje quite shares a different perspective that, well, it wasn't anything we should worry about,
right.
You know, that, look, even when the guy, the Bar Mukhtari yesterday was telling us about the applause that the guy even received.
Yeah.
So you were going to look at that and not really about the gun strapped to his waist. And so it's much ado about nothing. We still talk about it. Prof, I don't know. This is your colleague consultant who feels that, I mean, there's nothing really seriously wrong about what happened, so we should let it slide. Your thoughts?
No. The applause that Traore got was about his politics, about his transformative agenda for Burkina Faso, his role in the Accra Initiative, his magnanimity in accepting President Mahama's invitation to come to Accra after Ghana nearly sold him out to the United States. You know, so I'm also in full agreement that the gun issue should not let us overlook the importance of his presence and the way we need to rebuild our relationship with Burkina Faso. After, I mean, if you can play that clip from the United States, where President Akufo-Addo sought to sell Burkina Faso out. I mean, that in international relations. And I think my brother is in the studio. So, no. Okay. But for him to accept to come back also shows the dexterity with which President Mahama, after winning the elections in December last year, then traveled around the sub-region, sent his emissaries to begin the process of rebuilding connections and bridges. So the gun issue is actually very minute in terms of the significance of his presence.
Okay. Now, I bring a quote from him. He says, quote, all the at diplomatic level, when a head of state like Captain Traore has been invited, his protocol, state protocol, and Ghana's protocol, foreign affairs to foreign affairs, would have discussed how this head of state was going to attend the ceremony. Dressed in his normal camouflage and carrying his sidearm, he explained. Do you agree with his assertion that this could probably be a prearranged, something that happened?
Look, I truly worry when people are unable to say, oh, I think this is a slip, that we could have done it much better. All heads of states have huge egos. They want to be treated in particular ways. And I'm sure issues around the size of the delegation, the type of vehicles they want, all those things are discussed. The gun issue was unfortunate, it was improper, and it mustn't happen again.
Okay.
We can't afford to have either people who have guns on them purely for demonstrative reasons to do so. Let's not forget, and I've said this, Ghana's leadership of ECOWAS was particularly disastrous. When an ECOWAS emergency meeting took place, I think, at the Peduase Lodge. And people, military leaders, I think, from Burkina Faso and Mali, came to the meeting in their military fatigues. They were kicked out and told to go and wear civilian clothes. That was when they passed through the late President J.J. Rawlings' house, and he told them, you do or you wear what you think it is proper. So we shouldn't, try to look for excuses around this. But I want to make it clear that Traore's presence goes beyond the gun. His presence was much more important. So I think I've said my piece around this.
Yeah.
I want to look at a bigger, better, more important issues. That I think.
So we'll come there. We'll come to, rebuilding the security of the sub-region and the role Ghana has to play in it.
Right.
But let's come to...
Dr. Dodo, although we want to discuss Ghana's geopolitical standing, I do want to take a quick reflection on this matter before we get incisive with geopolitics. What did you make of this situation? In fact, when I watched the video, I missed the gun because the demeanor of Traore was very humbling. He took off his cap, went to shake Professor Jane, fist bumped the speaker. It didn't give any sense of threats or anything like that. But I don't know what you make of the whole situation.
Right. I was actually sitting in the same days with the diplomatic community as he arrived. And his entrance was very eroding. So you have a situation where it was almost like, oh, wow, this man is here. And then I saw his bodyguards. They came in with the guns, interacting with a vast majority of the dignitaries that was there. I also missed the gun part.
Okay.
But I hear what Professor Kwesi Aning is saying, that there are standards and decorum around heads of state and how you treat them. And particularly when you are the host, you need to uphold those standards. So this may be a bit of an oversight, but it could also be a bit of euphoria, or people were just excited about the whole fact that he accepted the invitation to come in. He was, if you remember, he was the last head of state to arrive and to join the whole program. So I think that would have been the issue. But then one of the other side of it, though, is Ghana is reasserting its leadership in the sub-region in terms of what we stand for as geopolitical leader. I know we'll go there. So the first impressions are very important. The question is, would you accept somebody who is not an elected head of state, but is a military man, and he is in his military demeanor, and he's coming to your occasion? Would you accept him the way he is? Because that is also a political statement.
Okay.
He would have chosen to remove his guns to come, but he also entered, so, okay, let me test how this man... And John Mahama, I believe, His Excellency John Mahama, they may, even though this may be an oversight, it may play well for us in the sense that he will go back thinking, this guy is not judging me like the ECOWAS commissioners did. And he's an open-minded person that I can have a conversation with and try to deal with my issue. If you speak with them, I was in the Sahel region when these things happened, and the anger in the population to kick against, the imperialism of France and the dominance of their economy and their politics, the population for the first time were hailing coup d'etat rather than a democratic, elections. And at the same time, you have organs such as, Organization United Nations and others who were kicked out more or less from the political discourse about what needs to happen with the country.
Right.
So there is that thing about a whole creation of, Traore and his Sahelian Mali, Niger, a Syrian fraternity, that we have to be very careful about how to manage it. And I believe that His Excellency, even though we may, this may be an oversight and something we shouldn't uphold, and I hear my big brother, Prof. Aning, and I really, really salute him for that. I believe that it will play well for us in a sense that it will send a strong signal to say, listen, I am open-minded. I understand the complexities of the geopolitics around. I know we are all not on the same page, but I'm willing to reset these relationships and make it work for us. And I believe he will go home thinking, this is a very smart president. That's what I believe.
But I mean, you're also looking at the message you send out there.
Yep.
With what ECOWAS did was, in their mind, trying to, send a signal to other people that you cannot do what they've done. Now, in the same way, if we say, okay, send a strong signal by thinking that we are open-minded, isn't it also sending a signal to other people in other countries that, well, you can still do a coup and come and mingle with the democratically elected
I actually disagree with that.
Okay.
Because when you look at ECOWAS and its structure and all the things that ECOWAS stands for, upholding democracy, strengthening international cooperations around the regions, setting standards for how politics, economics, and everything should be working. In fact, ECOWAS is more about economic commission of West African state. It has turned into be more of a political stalwart rather than, a state. Yeah. And also, ECOWAS is actually a voluntary organization that people would say, okay, we want to work together, put our differences aside and see what we can leverage together. Now, democracy has not yielded the dividends that we expect. All across the sub-region, people are very tired of what democracy is bringing to them. And when you particularly look at the Sahel region or the Francophone countries, they feel the dominance of their colonial power, which is France. And along France comes with, other countries within European Union. And when you look at the structure of the economy and politics, it's largely influenced by these entities to the disenchantment of the population. Okay. So there's a lot, we have to interrogate what we mean by good governance, what we mean by democracy, and how it should play out in our settings, in our sub-regional settings. Because the population don't feel that by and large in our politics is providing the dividends that they needed. Okay. So they are questioning that. So there's a lot of that questioning. You would imagine in some political discourse there's a conversation about rethinking our democracy, rethinking our democratic governance, rethinking how we actually engage our political leadership. And there are a lot of questions coming around. Why? Because we have very young population who perhaps are not attuned to political historical realms. And all they are saying is the last 5 years. And so people like Traore reflects their sentiments and reflect the type of politics that they want to see. So it's a chicken and egg situation to see John Mahama's team saying, okay, strip them off. They will not come.
Right.
But you also want to accept them for who they are, and then you can have an open conversation about some of the standards and the norms that you want to look at.
So that will be a bit on security, right? But I want to open the conversation up now in terms of everything that we saw, particularly with those 21 African heads of state.
So they will come there.
Right.
But earlier he made a point, and we have to do that and bring in Prof. Aning, and then we can go to where you want us to go. But you said that Ghana is asserting its leadership on the geopolitical space on the African continent. Did we lose it?
Let's be very frank with ourselves. I mean, Prof. Aning was mentioning that tape, of our president literally sending out our neighbors. It's not the right thing to do. In fact, when that happened, I got a lot of calls from some of my colleagues, not in West Africa alone, but East and Southern Africa. So what is happening? You cannot say that. If there's an issue, it's your neighbor. You can sit down and talk about it. Now, throughout the former president's tenure, and he's a very strong, powerful, experienced person within international realm. So I was expecting that the former president Ronaldo would have done very well in terms of handling some of these geopolitical issues. If you look at the transition between the father of foreign and his son, the way he handled that particular transition was very helpful, because the whole Togo was going to blow up under the circumstances. It was very, he played that with great wisdom. Now, the same thing, when you look at what's happening in the Sahel region, it's extremely complex, extremely multidimensional. It is not just terrorists. It has to do with post-colonial sentiments. It has to be neoliberalization. It has to do with youth, trying to state their place in the political economy of the country. It has many, many dimensions to it. So, and then you also have the international pose of China and Russia versus United States and their politics as well. So this geopolitical situation, if you put all together and you have an opportunity to talk about what is happening in your backyard, you have to be very wise in the way you articulate it. And he just sold out a neighbor and said, well, come and, deal with it. And then at the same time, when the coup d'etats happened, we knew that coup d'etat would happen in Mali. In fact, we knew the coup d'etat would have happened in Burkina. We have the intelligence. And Ghana has very strong intelligence. We knew the coup d'etat would happen in Niger. It should have happened earlier than even it happened. We knew, we were just waiting, and Prof will tell you, we're waiting for this.
And nothing could have been done to avert it.
Well, so leadership. In the past, Ghana could convene these three people, because, we have Nigerians who are here. If you go to Zamama line, these are Nigerians. Yeah. We have Nigerians who are trading our onions and control probably 80% of our onion trade. Burkina Faso was giving us 60-70% of our tomatoes. Kansanens, Kusasis, and these are all people that are belonging to the same tribal fraternity. So coming in and having leadership conversations about, hey, this is what we could have done. You will hear the Nigerians when the coup d'etat happened, they were even saying, nobody listened to us, and all we could hear was go and bomb them.
Okay.
So I think that we lost our space in political leadership, and we ceded it, to Francophones who actually the population don't even want.
Interesting perspective here. Professor Aning, I mean, you earlier started talking about that thing that former President Akufo-Addo did, which was wrong. But didn't he do that as a firm believer in democracy, feeling that, well, we cannot encourage other people to go about staging coups in their countries, and that's why he took that particular posture against what had happened in Burkina Faso and other countries where there had been coups?
No. And I'll be very blunt here. The type of governance that we had in Ghana could only continue and was not robbed because we have an armed forces that is highly educated, very nuanced in understanding the politics of the country and the conviction that the power of the thumb is greater than the gun. That is what saved the kind of disastrous governance that we have experienced in the last 8 years. And when this assertion or this attempt at selling out Burkina Faso was exposed, here I want to mention two people. General Ibrahim Traore, who headed the Accra Initiative Secretariat, and the National Security Minister, Mr. Kandapa, who showed extreme maturity and presence of mind in knowing the disastrous potential consequences of that attempt to sell out. The selling out was also an attempt to divert attention from the fact that Ghana's leadership of ECOWAS had been utterly disastrous. That we had not shown the sensitivity and the willingness to listen to the intelligence force. And I remember when the second Burkinabe coup happened, there was an ECOWAS meeting in Accra. And my first statement was, every single ECOWAS head of state present must then sack his intelligence chiefs. Because civil society knew there was something wrong. Academics knew there was something wrong. Dr. Dodu and his development agencies knew there was something wrong. The analysis were in abundance. ECOWAS from Abuja demonstrated such a cluelessness that it was just shocking. After the first Burkina coup, ECOWAS sent some of its representatives to Wagadugu, and they were nearly lynched because, as Dr. Dodo correctly says, there is this upsurge of youth agency and an anger that we have a gerontocratic set of political leaders who have lost touch with the reality on the suffrage. But Mr. Kufuor didn't seek to sell out Burkina Faso because he loved democracy. Far from it.
Okay.
When the Guinean president was overthrown, is it Condé or Conte? A man who had looted the resources out of from the bauxite boom. The president and Ouattara went to Conakry to speak to Doumbouya and to plead with Doumbouya for him to release the president. They were chased out of Conakry. Okay, so when Dr. Dodo says we are reasserting our leadership, that is true. If you've got the tapes, probably one day you can bring all these old tapes and show. When President Kufuor, in the heydays of his early rule, spoke to the French president and told him to his face that he was moving Ghana beyond aid, the whole of the African continent said, yes, that is the man. Who dares look at France and tell them some home truths? Was it a political game? Was it sincere? Or it was just to throw dust into our eyes? So the notion of reassertion is very key. Because Mahama speaks about the rising Black Star. President Tinubu says, I will walk with you. President Tinubu realizes that any drive to deepen Nigerians' hegemony will need Ghana's consistent and unflinching support. But Traore and Niger and Mali have started a process that most people dismissed in the beginning. Their capacity to tell France to get the hell out of their countries. Right now, Chad, an old friend of France, have told them, you've got to move your troops. Senegal has said the same thing. La Côte d'Ivoire, Mr. Ouattara, a die-in-the-wool francophone, has also said, please move your troops. We are beginning to see a certain agency manifesting itself. The question now is, how do we harness this in the midst of the problems that Dr. Dodo has mentioned? Multidimensional, consistently shifting and changing and transforming issues of youth, climate, migration, all this coming together in very complex forms. But not only that, my final point, there are existing relationships that span hundreds of years. When we talk migration, and people always wonder, but how can people cross the desert and then try to get into Europe, because the existing trans-Saharan trade routes are still known by people. So Dr. Dodo speaks about the Zamrama people. They don't only do currency, but most of the maize in Ghana, the maize trade is controlled by them. Likewise, the onion trade. We have the Burkinabes bringing us tomatoes and cattle. We have the Malians bringing us cattle. The biggest single cattle market in West Africa is at Fada in Guma, in Burkina Faso. So when Akufo-Addo sought to sell Burkina Faso, he forgot that a lot of the cattle that we eat actually is coming from the Fada and Guma market. Okay, so the levels of already existing interconnections are so key. But to be able to translate the president's vision of a Pan-Africanist, integrationist sub-region, and I think we need to come back to these three countries that are leaving ECOWAS, and how do we bring them back? We need a team in the foreign ministry, bold, daring to do the analysis, but also to tell Mr. President, this is the way we need to go.
What keeps ringing in my head now is how then do we reconcile, Prof. Aning, is that you say that our leadership at ECOWAS has been disastrous.
Yes.
Doc, you're also saying that we are reasserting our leadership. But we saw so many African head of states, not just in Africa, we saw other international diplomats, so to speak, coming here. How do we reconcile our current status, whether we are failing, now coming back on track, and then the numbers that we saw? What does it mean for our influence on the international diplomatic community?
First of all, diplomacy has language. And the first language that you can say you normally get is perception. In my reading of what happened, when I saw 21 head of state and a list and the envoys that came, and then some of the envoys are special envoys on particular issues. Sahel envoys were there, special envoys on trade relations. So when you look at the envoys that came and the themes which they follow, in economics, in trade, in politics, and so on, it just tells you that the diplomatic community have lost touch with some of these key connectivities that we do have previously with the African continent, in particular the West African continent. And therefore, they are saying in John Mahama, through his engagement before the elections, remember that he travels a lot to European Union, he engaged in peace and security matters. He was actually an envoy of the African Union Peace and Security and so on. So they do see that this is a man who can bring some solutions to what they're looking for, and which is really important for us. Now we can come back to how we can leverage that. But for now, I'm just creating the perceptions.
Yeah.
So they see in him a man with some solutions that can deal with some of this issue, climate security, injustice, economic challenges and so on and so forth, and how the world can engage West Africa in particular. If you look at in economics, for example, the West African market in the next 10 years could be probably $1.3 trillion. If you look at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and we want to really leverage the market, it's going to be incredibly powerful. And there's aging population in the European Union, and our population are made of youth. This speaks to, if we leverage ourselves, our human capital strategy well, we'll have the kind of talents that they will need versus the market potential that they will need. So there could be a reversal of trade. So everybody is also looking at that from that perspective. Then you have the whole issue around politics. How do you stabilize the fragilities in the sub-region? Togo is there, it's still not very, it's still fragile in terms of its politics. You also have the spread of the terrorism, not just on the coastline, but also in certain parts of the north. Then you have the situation of Mali, Niger, Burkina that has not been properly stabilized. Cote d'Ivoire is right there. Senegal is rocking the bull. We have so many things. So the sub-region is noisy.
Yeah.
And they see in John Mahama as someone who can help to stabilize this
So they didn't see this in Akufo-Addo?
No, not at all. But and so they came in to make a statement in solidarity. You remember, even the United States has to send a number of envoys to come, including the ambassador to the United Nations, who has served in Liberia during the reconstruction of Liberian War. After the war, during the reconstruction, that's when I worked very closely with the team. And she led the charge to come. So it's quite exciting. There's a lot of expectations. So I believe that His Excellency John Mahama has all these international expectations and also the expectations of Ghanaians. And as Prof. Kusenin said, how is it going to really manage this in terms of the team that he puts together within the foreign ministry who are very well versed, you should be well versed in the complexities and multidimensional nature of these particular issues, so that we can come out with a kind of a foreign policy vision that would inform his engagement in all these realms. And if we do it well, Ghana is going to really become powerful. I mean, you're trying to push an economy, 24-hour economy and accelerated export promotion. And then you have the international realms also working with. It means that countries would want to look at trade. You're going to have a lot of foreign direct investment coming in because they can see Ghana as the headquarters, which is stable, and they can leverage the opportunities in other countries. It's going to be beautiful, but extremely challenging.
But so, does it mean the world was angry or not happy with the Akufo-Addo government?
To be blunt, I'm going the word of prophecy. We have to be very blunt in order to be able to.
Yes.
I mean, some of the vibes that you get internationally is not very healthy. You have some countries literally saying, don't do any business with the country, with Ghana.
Wow.
Yeah, literally. And people are not very sure of what we mean by Pan-Africanism. And when you hear that we are reasserting the Black Star, it's a statement to say, look, we're still there. The lion may be sleeping, but he could wake up. And the reset is a powerful statement.
What reason were they given for saying don't do business with Ghana? Because we saw the year of return. And the sort of people it brought in, even beyond the return, the sort of people it brought in. So how do we juxtapose the two? That the world was angry with Ghana, but we still saw some numbers flowing into Ghana.
Or was Ghana that just for the entertaining bit of it?
No, it was I would describe the country then as being an enigmatic era, in a sense that it's a sour and taste situation. Whilst people want to really settle here, for the iconic reasons of what Ghana represents, the slave trade and coming back and so on, the year of return, and the way I will say that the way they handled the year of return was fantastic. Okay. Very well thought through, brought in a lot of people here.
So that's some credits to the Akufo-Addo.
No, it was the very, very interesting strategy, and that could have translated into serious foreign direct investment in the country. But when you look at the year of return, all the euphoria around it, and the number of people that visited, over 2 million, I think, that visited the country, comparing that with our foreign direct investment was gradually going down. So it didn't really translate into any economic benefits as you would expect, all right? At the same time, you have a country which is ransacked by, galamsey issue, and they can see all these things. Now, you affect your rivers, which is now, linking to the seas, and all these spectacles around that. Then we're also doing nothing to assert our leadership to deal with the complexity of the issues in the Sahel region. You know, so people are watching.
Right.
And this is why a lot of businesses came and went out.
Okay.
And do you know where they relocated to?
Ivory Coast.
Ivory Coast.
Yeah.
And so today you go to Ivory Coast, whilst we're suffering, for the past 8 years, the rate of economic growth in Ivory Coast is incredible. And it is translated into food security to a large extent, tourism to a large extent. Services in the digital realm is increasing in Ivory Coast. You see Societe Generale closing its shops and actually expanding in Ivory Coast because it makes geopolitical sense to do that. It's a special geolocation. If I can't pitch my headquarters in Ghana, I can pitch in Ivory Coast and still link the markets there. So people were thinking. People were thinking we didn't run this country. So that's what really happened. And so it matters. You know, no country today can thrive without understanding its geopolitical intricacies.
Right.
You really need to be smart about it.
Now, based on what you've said, in 2017, Akufo-Addo had similar sort of, how do you say it?
Diplomatic goodwill?
Yeah, overwhelming welcome from the world.
Okay.
Right. Prof. Aning referred to his speech with the France president where he said certain things that Africa became. But from what you said, he lost it. How can the John Mahama administration protect the sort of gains we've seen them make, even at the inauguration, such that it doesn't turn the sort of story we had in the past 8 years?
Yeah, but this is a very good question. I think that, first of all, President John Mahama needs to frame a very strong geopolitical vision or international relations vision that should guide the way he actually engages with different countries. A lot of things have changed. To answer this question, it is important for us to preface it around how the world is changing. We are seeing the shiftings in realms of power. And this is even displayed in the United Nations Security Council and how they vote. So you have certain powers, countries that become very powerful. So you have the China, you have the Indians, you have the Brazil, of course, the Russian with his own.
In fact, the president made a very clever reference to this.
To
The
BRICS.
You know, and all these are creating a club to the extent that the Russians are able to try to rejuvenate the Eurasian component. And then China is building a strategic relationship and strengthening it with over 36 to 40 African countries, talking about trade, talking about security exchange, talking about digital security, cyber security, intelligence, talking about technology transfer and things like that. So you are torn as a country, and then you have the election of President Trump, who wants to have a transactional relations with Africa, and whatever that means. If you are smart and you can propose a value, you can get value proposition to Trump, you'll be able to get the massive foreign direct investments that you're looking at. Then you have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which provides tremendous opportunities for trillions and trillions of dollars. Then you have Ghana in its special geolocation within West Africa. You know, equidistant to Europe, to South America, and then you have the sea. And then you are having strategic natural resources emerging from your countries, lithium, which are very important for digital economy, corpus and so on. So you need to think about how you can structure a foreign policy that will help you to leverage all these relationships. The presence of 21 head of state tells you that you have 21 markets potentially. All right? How can you frame? So Ghana must be known for something. If Rwanda is known for coffee, beside cocoa, what else can we be known for?
Gold.
Maybe you can, gold maybe, but maybe you can look at lithium. Can we become the hub that will extract, process lithium for the digital economy? Is it possible for us to have the chips manufacturing project for for Africa being located in Ghana?
Ghana.
Is it possible? These are some of the questions you need to have. Can you look at the cashew market, some of your cash crops, and how you can turn them into
Finished product.
finished products that can produce to meet your security needs, but also supply to the rest? Can you look at the grain sector? You know, we have to seriously take the country and start planning for how we create wealth, tremendous wealth for the country. And doing this will require being very innovative. There's also the opportunity to look at some other sources of funds that are coming. When Akufo-Addo talk about Ghana Beyond Aid, it should be thinking about more about innovative financing streams, such as SDG bonds, climate finance, carbon credit, all these billions of dollars that are going to come on the back.
We're making some money from carbon credits, for example.
Well, then the question then you have to do is, okay, you make the money, where do you put it? How do you put it to create more wealth for it? We have to think about how we manage our financings and how we allocate them to stimulate more wealth for ourselves. The type of industries or sectors that we want to grow, that will be very relevant to what the world wants. It's all about your value proposition to the world and how to attract it.
Okay.
And Ghana can do that. Ghana can really, really do that. But this has to be framed around a vision that you have to implement. And we have to be very disciplined in our implementation.
You've spoken about clarity and vision and all that. And what I'm hearing is that John Mahama is currently enjoying some beautiful diplomatic goodwill, right? In as much as we need to translate all these into economic liberation for the people of Ghana, there are also competing interests, the G7, BRICS, and all that. How does this administration navigate in terms of aligning or not aligning, but taking advantage of these interests and what they offer us without losing our sovereignty, without, going cup in hand and then they say that, okay, in order for us to help you, give us something that would turn out to be bad for us as a sovereignty. How do we actually navigate that? And I do want to tease your brains a bit because I know you're an expert in this field. So as specific as possible, what kind of foreign policy should we be pursuing? That does not sell the country to foreign powers.
Right.
Especially when we operate with a non-alignment policy.
Yes.
Because as you said, the BRICS are growing up, the G7 are dwindling in GDP, as the president said. But we also have this so what do we do based on what?
How do we actually navigate this without losing our heads?
Yeah, I think that it's a very complicated situation, and so you have to be very deliberate in the choices you make. So the first thing that I before I come to the foreign policy strategy, the first thing that I think that we need to do as a country is really to understand the interest of these entities. Why are they coming? What is necessitating their emergence? What do they want versus what you want? And then you can have a mutual relationship. So I would encourage that within our foreign affairs policy, we should have a strategic policies for engaging the BRICS, which is unique and bespoke to that. At the same time, we should have strategic policies for engaging every single country within West Africa. Strategic policy for engaging ECOWAS. It is not, we cannot be lazy about this.
It's not a one-size-fits-all.
So you have to be very intentional about what you do with it, and it has to be a mutual policy. That is what most of the developed countries actually do. When they come to your country, when the UK is here, they have a strategic cooperation framework, which is very clear to your country. We must do the same. We must not ride behind ECOWAS, regional blocs, as we have done before. Everyone must look after themselves.
Okay.
Really, if you stand on your feet, then you can provide the leadership that is needed. And you can bring the Liberia, the Sierra Leone, and others along who will look up to you as their big brother. But you must stand. So individual bespoke policies need to be pursued. That will be our first biggest policy strategy framework, that we are prosecuting a foreign relations policy which has something in it for regional blocs, for individual countries, and so on. And we know exactly what we are doing. And must also have strategic policy around how do we bring in the diaspora as well. That needs to be, and we need to that would be the biggest. But then our international relations policy must first and foremost look at our economic diplomacy. It's all about economics.
Yeah.
For the mutual interest of building our economy, creating jobs, and making us very, very sustainable.
Yeah.
All right. The other point is we need to look at our food sovereignty. Not food security, food sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
We must be able to produce our own food that we can eat and have surplus for manufacturing. And if that means that Ghana could become an extension of manufacturing, industrial manufacturing setup for our neighbors, whereas the tomatoes will be produced in Burkina, and we will process the tomato paste. And if that's what we need to do, let's do it. How do we have a relationship with Togo that leverages our economies of scale? A relationship with Cote d'Ivoire that leverages our economy of scale. We have to be extremely intentional about that. That should be our foreign relations policy as well. How do we then connect to ECOWAS? What's our standpoint? Are we going to become a leader that would bring everybody together? They don't agree, but when you convene, you always can get something that will protect you. And that should be wrapped around security. We need to keep our ECOWAS stable. Then look at the issues of governance. How do we rethink our democratic governance? What new could we bring to strengthen our democratic norms, the things that did not work and the things that work? How do we make sure that we get to a point where we are not beginning to see the 1980s coup d'etat as they were emerging again? And you make some contribution to some of those things. So those are the things, in a nutshell, that I think are the key elements that should advise our foreign relations.
Okay.
I'm curious to hear Prof. Aning.
More like building on how Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire is tackling the cocoa industry.
Right.
We decided that, well, we want to come together because we are the two leading producers. We'll go into the world market and demand for what they have to give us. So maybe building on that, but very, very interesting points there.
Prof. Aning, let's hear your thoughts. I know the conversation has advanced. I'm sure you have some thoughts to share as well.
Well, I think Dr. Dodo started his submission by using the word, a lot of noise has been made in Accra. Noise also has quality and can be disaggregated. The razzmatazz of the last 8 years must shift to noise underpinned by knowledge. And that is what Dr. Dodo has been talking about. How do we disaggregate our friends and be context-specific in dealing with these countries? And when I say knowledge is key, closely related to that is that leadership is key. So if you look at or listen to what Dr. Dodo is saying, the economy is going to play a very big role. And this almost reminds me of President Kufuor when he came to power in 2001 and made economic security or economic diplomacy the heart of his government. And some of the great speeches that Akman Oswajima gave around economic diplomacy. So we need a finance minister and a finance ministry attuned to doing things differently. But we also need a foreign ministry that is just not interested in the razzmatazz of whining, dining, and dancing and big empty talk, flowery language. We need a foreign ministry that meshes with the economic side, but also with the defense side. So were you to ask, and I'm hoping, but I know it will not happen, the appointments committee in Parliament, the new 9th Parliament, when people are brought forward, and they were questioned, people from the sensitive ministries, why do we do things the way we don't? What drives Ghana's policy when the foreign minister goes to ECOWAS to African Union and says the things that they say, what is it that drives them? And you will be shocked that there is not a single policy document that says this is Ghana's stance. I challenged a foreign minister several years ago, and I said, look, you've come to my institute, you've said all these things. What is the basis? And of course, this minister said, oh, of course, those who wrote the speech, no, I mean, it's Ghana's position. After 2-3 months, this minister came back and said, look, there is no document. We don't have a policy document that says when it comes to the environment and we go to ECOWAS, this is where we stand. This is how our policy, or this is what our policy is based on. So together with 1 or 2 people, then wrote a policy for Ghana with respect to ECOWAS. We ought to have done it with the African Union, UN. And Dr. Dodu will tell you this. You go to a lot of meetings where our positions flip-flop, okay? So what we are asking for is that then there's the need for a much more targeted, deliberate analysis and understanding of what we want. The European Union is a huge set of countries. I think Bulgaria and Romania have just joined or something. You know, we cannot treat the European Union as the homogeneous, and yes, we're a member of ECOWAS, but different ECOWAS countries have different policies. If we take Togo, for example, most ECOWAS countries have decided that, you know, the AES countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, are under sanctions. But Togo has calculated what is national interest and reduced the demurrage charges for these, you know, 3 countries, and actually gave them a leeway of 40 days to pay their taxes and their debt. You see, and that is what leadership and knowledge is about. Knowing how to differentiate between different countries and where the national interest lies. Furthermore, I think we've spoken about our inability to gain something from the year of Ray 10. The larger project was called the Joseph Project, you know, initiated by Jake Opechebi, you know, Lambton.
I see.
But characteristic of the way we do our business, it is a personalized and not institutionalized process. So people come and decide that, oh, this is the elephant's tail, oh, this is the trunk, oh, that is the horn, oh, that is the nose, and then just run off with it. Resetting, and I agree with Dr. Dodu, it's a very powerful, positive word. Okay, how do we do that? It cannot and must not be done in a haphazard manner. President Mahama has been the chair of the Tana Forum. The Tana Forum is a gathering of Africa's brightest minds in Ethiopia every single year. And Mahama has chaired this, or President Mahama has chaired this for the past 5-6 years. So the people who care have shared several views, ideas, and then thoughts. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay.
I know that right now, the man can barely get probably 8 hours of sleep because everyone wants to get a job.
Yeah.
But you know, Ghana has changed. West Africa has changed. The Sahel has changed, and Africa has changed. And I said this on the 8th to the president-elect, now the president. There is only a tiny window of delivering on his promises. The 26 points in the social contract with Ghana must deliver. His team must now be thinking, what and where are the low-hanging fruits that we can demonstrate very quickly that we mean business? Dr. Dodo has mentioned the Galamsey, and that is one of my regrets with the president's very great inaugural speech, that in the 4 priority areas, Galamsey, the environment, did not appear. The greatest single existential threat, and here I disagree with our Tari, it's not about unemployment. It's about the environmental crisis that we are facing out of Galamsey that is posing an existential threat to us. One, already several UN organizations have flagged the potential or the actual danger that Galamsey is posing to Ghana and West Africa. Two, there are tensions between Ghana and La Côte d'Ivoire as to how Galamsey is poisoning their waters. Yep. Number 3 relates to the organized criminal networks that are stealing most of the 8 tons of gold produced in Ghana. We are only getting about 1.5 tons, thereabouts. Okay, so we need to come back very quickly to do a hierarchy of the most important things. Galamsey is mentioned twice in the social contract. I think points 9 and 13 or 23, I'm not too sure, but it's mentioned twice. Okay, so we need to understand that the challenges facing this government are immense. Already the energy is out there. Okay, so what we are looking for is a leadership, a team driven by knowledge.
Okay.
The modern economy, the security challenges must have people leading it that have the capacity not to just accept what our partners tell us. I mean, there's been this rather annoying set of statements over the last couple of years that, oh, the terrorists are coming down south. Coming down south to where? Okay? And that even in trying to understand what our security challenges are, people were looking first and foremost at their own pecuniary interest. So we need people who can be tough, who can do the analysis, and who can ensure that we place Ghana as the fulcrum, or Ghana's interest as the fulcrum.
Thank you, Prof.
I mean, quite interesting point being shared. But I want to ask you two gentlemen, if you look at how BRICS is gaining ground, I mean, just recently, more countries have joined than the original countries that came together to form BRICS. And if you listen to President Mahama, where he quoted the GDP of BRICS and G7, even though we operate with a non-alignment, at this point of our development, wouldn't anyone recommend that probably we look at BRICS to be part of the alliance, or wouldn't it make sense to try to align to any of these sides?
Well, I want to be very Pan-Africanist in this, answer this. We have started the Africa Continental Free Trade.
Free trade, yes.
This free trade area is humongous in terms of the opportunity that is going to happen. You don't hear a lot of traction going there in terms of how do we really roll it out? What is the strategy for each African country to really leverage on this particular initiative? And so I see BRICS as a bit of a distraction from our focus.
Okay.
Which is the after?
Of the after. And I'll explain that. Today, if Ghana or most African countries, and Prof will bear me out on this, is to engage that trade. Let's take Ghana, for example. If it is cashew to the market, the Indians are the ones that are going in 90% of the several billions of dollars you're going to have. they're Indians. And they're part of BRICS. If you were to look at, mention any commodity, sugar, that would depend on the maize, mention any commodity. These are all billions and billions of dollars. But it is not in the control of the Africans. This is not just Ghana, but all over, with the exception of Egypt, Tunisia, and other people where
Morocco.
Yeah.
So the question you need to ask is, brilliant opportunity, how do we leverage it? How do you structure your economy so that you produce the type of commodities that are very, very key and important for you to create wealth out of it, based on this market which is being established? Let me take our mind back to why I said food sovereignty.
Yeah.
When we are under colonial rule in just after 1950s and 60s, as soon as we gain our independence, before we gain our independence, we were producing enough for ourselves and to feed our colonial powers.
Yeah.
We had food sufficiency in Ghana. And at the same time, we were creating food sufficiency in United Kingdom. Yeah. But soon after independence, we lost our food sufficiency. And then our colonial powers, what did they do? They established the European Union, subsidizing agricultural program, something like that, and tilted everything. And then we are left to be selling cash crops. Cash crops for what? To feed their interest, their chocolates and coffee,
their industry,
and so on.
Yeah.
So then you take a cash crop, that actually then, you have to spend so much money. You have to spend so much money to try and meet the standards that they require, to the point that your margins of profit reduces. This is all economic imperialism.
Okay.
And that structures have not changed in our global market. So when Prof said you need a team that really can do such thorough analysis of what we need to have as a country to leverage on the enormous opportunity that we generate within Africa ourselves. BRICS could be, you can have a partnership relation with BRICS, and you can set up a foreign relations strategy and say, okay, I'm going to have an MOU with BRICS, and this is the way I'm going to engage BRICS. But I don't need to join BRICS.
Okay.
I will focus on African Continental Free Trade Area agreement and really determine which commodities should I be known for, in addition to cocoa in the country. And I think you have your maize, you have your cashew, you have others that we can really grow.
You have rice.
You have rice. You have, that you can really grow. And you have a geolocational space that you can really structure a very strong human capital strategy through your education to provide the competencies and skills that foreign direct investors need and make Ghana the manufacturing hub and the distribution hub. Control the supply chain, control the value chain of these commodities. What prevents you from doing that? In this time, we have no excuse. We have the energy, we have the brains, we just must be intentional, disciplined, and courageous. I believe that.
You mentioned after, and you've spoken a lot about leveraging the opportunities there, but I also know that there are so many challenges in terms of infrastructure, the differences in tariffs in the various countries, so many reasons why we are not as successful as we ought to be. Do you think we can do without BRICS and the other world powers, the G7? Do you think that, given that you've said that billions of dollars can come from there, do you think we can do without it if we focus on fixing the gaps that exist within the African Continental Free Trade Area, so that we can, leverage, because there's so many opportunities there that we can thrive on without aligning with whether BRICS or G7. Are we able to do that?
I don't think the issue should be, the question is, can we do without? No, because globalization is a reality. We will need to engage others. Yeah. So it's about determining your partnership strategy. So African continent must determine partnership strategy, with BRICS, with G7, with G20, and we have to do that because things are shifting. Whoever controls the supply chain would actually control the value. And what is happening now is that we have the energy on our side, we have the human capital on our side in terms of the youthfulness of our population, and we have the land on our side for even producing enough for ourselves and for manufacturing. Okay. And we have, when we strengthen our 21st century skill, we skill our human capital, we should be able to engage in a digital economy. So I think that they have something, they are looking at Africa. Let me tell you, the G7 has an African strategy. Why would they do that? Why would the G20 have a bespoke strategy how they deal with the issue of Africa? Why would they do that? At the same time, developed countries within the G7 has individual African strategies as well. Why would the White House have an African?
Because Africa is the source of their raw material.
Exactly, and it matters. And it's all about power relations. And you need to understand these geopolitical power relations and ask yourself, what do you want to do? And that's why I feel that the goodwill we have today, we have to leverage it with a very strong geopolitical foreign policy that will enable us to stand on our feet. When we stand on our feet, then the Black Star will happen. That's how you bring others along. But for now, we have to be very intentional.
Dr. Aning, Prof. Aning, speaks about the fact that a minister told him there's no policy which is dictating our international relations. At what point in the life of this government should they have that policy to tell Ghanaians and all of you who are experts in this field how serious this government is to take Ghana from where it is today to the next level where we have to be?
I would answer this question very straightforward. As soon as a minister is appointed, you should kickstart doing all this analysis, bring the minds, as Prof. Aning said, bring them together, let them have an holistic look at Africa, the world, and what it means to Ghana. And let's structure a very strategic policy framework that should guide our engagement. And that shouldn't be difficult to do. This could be done within 10 days, 2 weeks. I mean, well, because we know the answers and we know where we are going. It is not as though that we don't have the answers here. You put the right minds together, you can frame this. And once that is framed, it has to be institutionalized. And every member of diplomatic settings or a member of the foreign service need to really accustom themselves to this foreign policy and make sure that it then translates into strategic actions in each of the diplomatic spots where we put people. So the ambassador in Washington, D.C. is going to deal with the World Bank, would take this policy, translate it into how do we strategically engage the World Bank different from what we have done before. How do we strategically engage the White House different from what we have done before? How do you strategically engage the members of the diplomatic corps who we want to do international trade with, who are Africans within the Washington DC, or they are in Europe or whatever, different from what we've done? We have to, if we show such seriousness, people will begin to look at us very differently.
But if it's that easy, then why really?
It took the wind out of my sails.
Have we not been?
Why are we here discussing this at this point?
I don't know the reasons why, but I would imagine that over time we've become very used to the fact that we are Ghanaians and we are the Black Star, we are African leaders. So we turn up ECOWAS, people must give us a seat until Rwanda turns up. Yeah, you go to African Union, people must go until Rwanda turns up, Tanzania turns up, and then now you have Botswana. And then you have, so, and all the other countries, are becoming strong economically, powerfully, and it shows up in their engagement in the UN Security Council. It also shows up in the engagement in the G7 group of 77 in Africa and China in the United Nations. And it shows up in the engagement in ECOSOC and all the organs of the 9 nations. And then when you begin to hear that, this so-and-so individual of a particular African country is now the Under-Secretary General for this, Under-Secretary General for that, and you in Ghana, we've lost, since Kofi Annan, we begin to lose all our representation in most of these strategic places. It just tells you that we became very complacent, and we thought maybe it's on a little bit of arrogance was in us. Things have changed. Things have changed. But thank God that we have a situation where the goodwill is coming back. So now we have to be more intentional about it.
Because if you keep losing all of these strategic people in strategic places like you've mentioned, of course you should then be alert that something is not right.
Look at our leadership across the United Nations system. How many Under-Secretary Generals do we have? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Maybe Assistant Secretary General, since Dr. Aning Chambers left, we've lost a spot in Under-Secretary General position.
Wow.
Whereas we have 5 or so in Senegal, we have Tanzania, we have others. I mean, you have WTO led by Nigeria. Now, tell me. So there's a lot for us to think about. And it's not as though we don't have the human capital. We do. We do have people.
Let me just ask, and I'm curious to know, we started about talking about Mahama's goodwill and all that, and I stand corrected. So does the coming of Mahama, should I say the second coming of Mahama, improved our ratings in the geopolitical space and what we could achieve in terms of ratings? Has it improved? I know it's still early days, but has John Mahama done anything just by becoming the president now, done anything to improve our ratings and where we stand in the geopolitical space?
I mean, international relations is all about perception, you know. So
it's good for us? So
you see, the ratings will start going up immediately. And I've heard some vibes coming from other countries saying, hey, you know, congratulations for good to have John Mahama back. And so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean,
for me, it's good news.
People, and if you know him personally, and I have had the privilege to know him quite personally, not know him personally, but privilege to work with him on close proximity around some of the international relations. He's a very intelligent man. He understands the issues. He's very thorough in his thinking, in his analysis, which is why he continued to maintain the chairmanship of TANA and provide the leadership at such very important institution. So he has the respect, he commands that respect, and he listens. He listens quite well. He's also very charming, so it's all part of the charismatic nature is also part of diplomacy. That will help. Now, this has to be translated into action.
Yes.
And I think that's where the challenge is for him.
But really, someone just says we must go beyond our non-aligned foreign policy slogan. You feel so?
I think we should. We should go along non-aligned foreign.
So we should align.
No, I'm not saying we should align. We should. The fact that you don't use it does not mean you align. We must be more intentional and focus on partnership.
Okay.
You have to be, because yes, there are in partnership in looking at different entities. So yes, you partner with ECOWAS, much different way than you have partnership with individual countries of ECOWAS.
But does the non-aligned policy we operate prevent us from entering into partnerships with any of these?
No, it doesn't at all.
Okay,
it doesn't. You just non-align in your thinking. But there are situations where you also have to be aligned on particular issues. For example, we have to be aligned on an international cooperation framework across our West African region for peace and security. We must be aligned in that.
So should we be reviewing that policy, our non-aligned? Should we review it or keep it and go beyond, look further?
I think the world has changed. Yeah. And as I said, that political poles have, power relations have changed. I wouldn't say that, China can compete with the US, but there are tensions there. There are tensions there. Yeah. And as a result, because of the way things are changing, and mostly driven by economic power and the realities of the 21st century, which is going to, and with artificial intelligence and all that, is going to change the way people organize. Power relations are also going to be changed because supply chains and value chains are going to change. So you need to understand these things. And this is why it's important that you review some of these policies that you have. Even if you don't change the policies, it's important to interrogate the question. I mean, is it still relevant? is it still appropriate to context?
Does it serve as well?
Does it serve as well? And you know, and the issue of Ghana, well, I mean, I don't want to quote Trump, but Ghana first is extremely important. We have to focus on ourselves, how we build ourselves and how we engage the rest of the world, so that Ghana will have a unique identity and a unique brand. Some countries do. You know, do we have it?
It's been a very insightful. You have some more?
Just about wrapping up, and we're talking about Ghana's, you know, role in international geopolitics. We know that our immediate past Foreign Affairs Minister, Shirley Ayoko-Boche, is the General Secretary for the Commonwealth League of Nations, right? It's the Commonwealth, really. Not. How can that also become a catalyst for Ghana's effort to take its place on the international geopolitical terrain?
I think we have to understand that Commonwealth is Commonwealth. The fact that you have a Ghanaian leading it does not mean that Commonwealth she will be able to sway Commonwealth interests and opportunities to Ghana. But it's significant in the sense that it's Ghanaian actually leading it. Now, it is up to His Excellency the President to sit down with them and say, how can I leverage who you are for the benefit of my country? And a lot of people, I remember in the Secretary's office when Donald Trump was elected and came in, and his team that came, the conversation we had was very transactional. And you ask yourself, this is a big person, this is a big country in a Security Council, and they are seeking their personal interest. One would expect that, you know, this is United States, so in the Security Council, I can do what I want. But they were very intentional. They were extremely intentional about what they want to draw out of the United Nations system. You know, and I think it's
that's a sort of mentality we should be having.
We should have that mentality now, because things have changed. And, you know, let's all be one in ECOWAS, and it's not going to serve our interests if we don't state our personal interests to know what exactly we want and what value we bring to that relationship. We must always think that way.
Interesting.
Dr. Dodu, I feel like I understand geopolitics all over again just by engaging you.
Someone says, your morning show today has been outstanding so far. Very educated. Professor Aning and Dr. Dodu, fantastic discussion. Then he says, we've lived in our past glory because of weak intra-African quality competition in all fronts since the year 2000. My name is Enoch Kojo Apia, former DC for Shama in the Western region.
Thank you for that.
Very humbling.
Very, very.
Thank you so much. Well, Dr. Ishmael Ni Amano Dodu is former senior UN diplomat, Executive Office of UN Secretary General and UNDP Africa Bureau. Thank you so much. And we also had joining us via Zoom Professor Kwesi Aning, who is a security consultant providing bespoke services. And that ends it for this belt of conversation. But before we go, a gentle reminder about Soul Lagoon View Estate, a development of the luxury emerald properties. And they have some great news for all homeowners, residents, and all their clients. They are thrilled to announce that their loyal clients can enjoy their original prices this festive season. Imagine waking up in a serene, gated community with top-notch infrastructure, secure documentation, and exciting recreational facilities available. Join this happy family by purchasing the few service plots available. And they have optional packages for your own dreams, your dream house, architectural designing, getting permits, and even helping you with your boundary wall. How do you locate them or contact them? Call them 0201-873-799. Soul Lagoon View Estate, your health and recreational heaven. Stay with us. We are back with more action on the AM show.